International Conference on Accounting and Finance.
Paper presenters, distinguished invitees, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, I would like to express my sincere thanks to the International Institute of Knowledge Management for inviting me to deliver the keynote address of this conference. I earnestly hope that this conference on accounting and finance, organized for the first time in Sri Lanka, would be of immense value to all of its stakeholders. Its deliberations will result fruitful ends to all the stakeholders. The conference chair explained the broad purpose of this conference. Though this conference is not confined strictly to a particular theme, the papers presented here are focusing on some pertinent issues relating to corporate governance, regulations in accounting, and some behavioral aspects of capital markets. The markets, regulations, practices dealt in these papers are artificial, legal, or social constructions. Hence, the viability of these aspects depend on the effective and ethical interactions of various individuals involved with their operationalization. The ethical disposition of these individuals underpins their behaviors, which collectively provide the framework for ethical values, resulting in a fair and transparent system of accountability and responsible practices in business entities and capital markets. Hence, in my speech, I would focus on this ethical dimension with a particular reference to accounting and the role of accountant in the context of business organizations. Here, the term accountant is used as a generic term to denote the accounting professionals working in organizations in various capacities. Ethics of a business is currently a high-profile issue. It came into prominence in the recent times with the upsurge of corporate collapses in the world that have caused much social and economic turmoil to many countries, both developed and developing. These corporate scandals question the morality of businessmen in general and accountants in particular. In all these situations, it is argued that the accountants have been the main contributors to the decline in the ethical standards of a business. International Federation of Accountants, ICAF, the mother body of professional accounting bodies operating in various countries, in its research report titled Rebuilding Public Confidence in Financial Reporting, an International Perspective, published in 2003, after the collapse of Enron and WorldCom in 2002, concluded that these financial scandals were systems of deeper problems and identified that improvement of ethical standards, adequacy of financial management, reporting mechanisms, audit quality, and strengthening of governance as means to improve public confidence in financial reporting. The accounting profession has a responsibility towards all these areas whose deficiencies have led to the sensational corporate scandals and collapses in many parts of the world. Hence, ethical conduct of accounting professionals has become a topical issue. In this respect, it is important for us to deliberate on the concept of ethics, various theoretical perspectives guiding the ethical judgment of individuals and the ethical conduct and the professional practice of accountants in particular. The concept of ethics. Everyone has some inner understanding of what constitutes the ethical behavior of a person. However, problems arise when we try to define this term ethics. Our definition of ethics is shaped by personal, social, and professional values, all of which are difficult to specify. Some stress the importance of society's interest, and others stress the interest of individuals. These conflicting viewpoints have dominated the discussion on ethics for a long time and may also remain in the domain in the future as well. Further, the term ethics we need to define in this context. The word ethics is derived from the Greek word ethos, meaning character, and the Latin word moras, meaning customs. Taken together, these two words define how individuals choose to interact with one another. Thus, ethics is about making correct choices. It signifies how people act in order to make the right choice and produce good behavior. However, decision making based on intuition or personal feeling will not always lead to the right course of action. Therefore, to facilitate an ethical decision of a person, we need to follow an acceptable criteria which would ensure the good judgment. The philosophical theories of ethics will come into scene at that point, because these theories provide different and distinct criteria for good, right, and moral judgment. In this respect, it is important to draw attention to three prominent theories on ethics: utilitarianism, rights, and justice. These theories are considered as normative theories of ethics as they provide principles and standards on how a person ought to behave towards others by considering the right and wrong of an action. These theories are divided into two broad classifications as consequential theories and non-consequential theories. Consequential theories always define good in terms of its consequences. The best known theory in this respect is theory of utilitarianism. In contrast, non-consequential theories define good not by its consequences but by its intrinsic value. Best known theories in this respect are theories of rights and justice. A wider discussion of these theories is required to understand their implications to the role of accountant in an organization. According to the theory of utilitarianism, the ethical alternative is the one that maximizes good consequences over bad consequences. Jeremy Bentham, who is considered as the father of utilitarian ethics, defined utilitarianism as the greatest happiness principle, which measures good and bad consequences in terms of happiness and pain. In his book, An Introduction to the Principles of Morals and Legislation, he says, I quote, "Nature has placed mankind under the governance of two sovereign masters, pain and pleasure. It is for them alone to point out what we ought to do as well as to determine what we shall do. On the other hand, the standard of right and wrong, on the one hand, the standard of right and wrong, on the other, the chain of causes and effects are fastened to their throat. They govern us in all we do, in all we say, and all we think." Unquote. The terms of happiness and pain described in this theory have broad meanings. They encompass all aspects of human welfare, including pleasure and sadness, health and sickness, satisfaction and disappointment, positive and negative emotions, achievement and failure, as well as knowledge and ignorance. Thus, ethical conduct of accountants based on this theory leads to consideration of all possible consequences of a decision for all parties affected by it. The consequences are considered in terms of benefits and cost of each alternative course of action considered in taking a decision. As per this theory, the accountant should select the course of action that yields the greatest sum of benefits over cost for the greatest number of people. This theory takes a pragmatic and a common sense approach to ethics. Actions are right to the extent that they benefit people. Thus, the cognitive process involved in this theory require the utilitarian decision making appear similar to the cost-benefit analysis that we normally adopt in business decisions. However, there are important distinctions between the cost-benefit analysis that we used in business decision-making and this approach in terms of nature of consequences, the measurability of the consequences, and the stakeholder analysis. Usually in the business cost-benefit analysis, our focus is only on the financial benefits and costs. But here, the benefits and costs have a much broader meaning, and the consequences to a larger group of stakeholders are considered. On the other hand, the theory of rights stems from the belief that people have an inherent worth as human beings that must be respected. Therefore, according to this theory, a good decision is one that respects the rights of others. Conversely, a decision is wrong to the extent that it violates another person's rights. In general, the rights can be divided into two broad categories. Natural rights, the rights that exist independently of any legal structure. We usually call these rights human rights or constitutional rights. Other category is the legal rights or the contractual rights, rights that are created by social agreements. Among many natural rights, the right to truth is important to the functioning of accounting. The right to truth explains the need to provide correct information to the parties who make use of that information. The users of financial reporting have the right to know the truthful and accurate information when making decisions. It could be decisions on the investment strategies or granting credit to the organizations or employees' decisions about the organization. This right imposes a moral obligation on the accountant and the reporting entity to provide a fair presentation of business activities in their financial statements and other types of reports generated through the accounting function. On the other hand, the legal and contractual rights are important in the accountant-employer as well as the accountant-client relationships. These contractual relationships mean that employers and clients have a legal right to expect professional and competent service from the accountants. In turn, the accountants have a corresponding legal duty to perform their tasks to the best of their ability within the constraints of their expertise. Understanding theory of justice requires understanding various notions of justice. Generally, the term justice is described as fairness, which refers to the correlation between the contribution and the reward for an effort. However, fairness alone cannot define the term justice. Therefore, we need to consider the other forms of justice as well. They include equality, which assumes that all people have equal worth, procedural justice, which is concerned with the due process followed in activities, and compensatory justice address the loss from a wrongful act. However, a comprehensive theory encompassing all these aspects is yet to develop. Therefore, in today's deliberations, I would like to focus on the theory of justice based on the principle of distributive justice, which deals on how fairly one's decisions distribute benefits and burdens among the members of a group. Unjust distribution of benefits and burdens is an unjust act, and an unjust act is a morally wrong act. Hence, under this theory, the ethical decision is one that produces fairest overall distribution of benefits and burdens to the people affected by these decisions. This theory expects the accountants to set procedures and rules in organizations that would result in fair and just distribution of its outcomes. Thus, accounting procedures should be well defined, communicated, and corresponding rules should be administered fairly and enforced impartially in both organizations and markets. Though these theories of ethics provide different perspectives to the same problem, in doing so, they improve the accountant's awareness and understanding of the ethical issues involved in the world of business. In this context, the ethical conduct of accountants in professional practice needs to be discussed. It is extremely important for accounting professionals to be ethical in their practice due to the very nature of their profession. The nature of accountants' work put them in a special position of trust in relation to their clients, employers, and general public, who rely on their professional judgment and guidance in making decisions. These decisions in turn affect the resource allocation process of an economy, and their outcomes are felt by the society as a whole. The accountants are relied upon by others because of their professional status and ethical standards to which they are expected to adhere. Thus, the key to maintaining the confidence of clients and public is the professional and the ethical conduct of the accountant. Ensuring highest ethical standards is important to a public accountant as well as accountant in a business. Who is a public accountant? Public accountant is the one who renders professional services such as taxation and auditing services to clients for a fee. In the firms of chartered accountants, we generally find public accountants. In Sri Lankan context, these firms are popularly known as audit firms. Accountants in business are the accountants who are employed in private and public sector organization for a salary. Both public accountants and accountants in business are in a fiduciary relationship, former with the client and latter with the employer. In such relationship, they have the responsibility to ensure that their duties are performed in conformity with the ethical values. Thus, accountants as professionals are expected to maintain a level of ethical conduct that goes beyond society's laws. This has made the professional accounting bodies to develop a code of professional conduct, which is a set of rules designed to induce a professional attitude and behavior in accountants consistent with the high ethical standards expected from them by the public. According to the Code of Ethics for Professional Accountants, issued by the International Ethics Standards Board of ICAF in 2013, that a professional accountant should comply with the various ethical dilemmas that they face when they carry out their activities in organizations and markets. The framework for international education standards for professional accountants, issued in 2009 by the International Accounting Education Standards Board of ICAF, identifies that the overall objective of accounting education should be to develop competent professional accountants who would possess necessary professional knowledge, professional skills, and professional values, ethics, and attitudes. Thereby, now all the professional accounting bodies should emphasize the ethics as a core component of their education process. In this respect, the International Education Standard 4 on Professional Values, Ethics and Attitudes, issued by ICAF, integrate relevant ethical requirements into the professional accounting education. These ethical principles or the ethical requirements included in IS4 represent the 5 fundamental principles of professional ethics set out in ICAF Code of Ethics for Professional Accountants. In IS4, professional values, ethics, and attitudes are defined as the professional behavior and characteristics that identify professional accountants as members of a profession. These include the ethical principles generally associated with and considered essential in defining the distinctive characteristics of professional behavior. Therefore, these values, ethics, and attitudes include a commitment to technical competence and professional skills, ethical behavior, professional manner, pursuit of excellence, and social responsibility. So this definition implies the broad perspective in which the professional ethics should be considered. In this respect, IS4 requires professional accounting bodies to distinguish between educating prospective professional accountants about professional values, ethics, and attitudes, and developing and maintaining an appropriate environment for ethical behavior in them. Therefore, development of professional values, ethics, and attitudes in an accountant is achieved through 2 stages. Firstly, through the initial professional development that they obtain to be an accountant. In this process, they get the formal education, training, as well as experience gained in by working in an organization. However, that alone will not inculcate these ethical values and principles in an accountant. Therefore, IS4 requires this ethical education to be continued throughout their career as part of continuous professional education, continuous professional development, and to become a lifelong training for the accounting professionals. As business organizations operate in a demanding and complex world of competing interests, the accounting professionals are facing many ethical issues. How accountants deal with these ethical issues is a measure of their success. The professional values, ethics, and attitude that are inculcated in the professional accountants will shape their responses to these ethical issues encountered in their day-to-day activities. However, This requires the support of the business leaders who set the tone for ethical conduct in the organization. Hence, I would like to conclude my speech by emphasizing the need to develop an ethical culture in business organization with a code of ethical conduct and the senior management setting the tone for its effective implementation. This would enable both business leaders and accounting professionals to respond ethically to various challenges that they face in this complex world of business. Thereby, they can avoid sensational corporate collapses to be happen in the future. These collapses, if we could avoid, will be of immense value to the entire world. So with that note, I would like to conclude my speech. Once again, I thank the International Institute of Knowledge Management for inviting me to deliver this keynote address, and I hope that the deliberations of today's as well as tomorrow's sessions will be of immense use to this audience. And I also wish that you would continue this conference in years to come with much higher participation. Thank you very much.